Armin had always dreamed of living in a quiet neighborhood, away from the constant noise of the city. After years of saving, he finally bought a small but beautiful house at the end of a peaceful street. The house had a bright garden in front, tall trees around, and most importantly, enough space on the roof for his dream project solar panels. For Armin, these panels were not just about saving money. They were a symbol of independence. He had worked as an engineer for years and had always admired the power of renewable energy. He believed in using sunlight to create his own electricity, to live in a way that was both smart and respectful to nature. The day his solar system was installed, he felt like a child who had just received his favorite toy. He stood outside for hours, staring at the black shining panels as they absorbed the sun. Life was good in the beginning. Every morning, Armin would wake up to the soft glow of sunlight entering his room. The birds sang, and the neighborhood was calm. His new home was not very big, but it was filled with peace. He had his books, his little electric scooter, and now his own source of energy. It felt like everything was finally in balance. But soon, Armin noticed something unusual. One afternoon, while watering his plants, he heard a faint humming sound from the side of his house. Curious, he walked around and froze in place. Parked there was a shiny white Tesla, its cable connected to his outdoor outlet. The green charging light on the car blinked slowly, showing that the car was filling up with electricity. Armin frowned. He had never given anyone permission to use his power. At first, he thought maybe it was a mistake. Perhaps the neighbor didn't realize the outlet was private. Maybe she believed it was community property. After all, this was an HOA-managed neighborhood, where some things were shared. He looked around and saw a woman in her early 50s walking back toward her house. She had short blonde hair, wore large sunglasses even though the sun was soft, and walked with the kind of confidence that told everyone she was not used to hearing no. Armin cleared his throat and called out politely, "Excuse me. Is this your car?" The woman turned with a smile. "Yes, that's mine." "Why?" Armin tried to keep his tone friendly. "This outlet here is connected to my personal solar system. It's not a shared source. I think there might be some confusion." The woman laughed lightly, almost dismissively. "Oh, don't worry. You've got all those panels up there. You must be making more energy than you can use. Why let it go to waste when my Tesla can use it? It's good for the environment too." Armin blinked, surprised by her boldness. He explained again, "I understand, but it actually costs me. The batteries and the system are my responsibility. Please don't use it without asking." Her smile faded just a little, replaced by a sharper look. "Don't be selfish. We live in a community. Sharing is part of the HOA rules." With that, she turned and walked into her house, leaving the car plugged in as if the conversation had never happened. Armin stood there, unsure what to do. He didn't want to start a fight with a neighbor on his very first month in the community. Maybe she really didn't understand. Maybe she thought he was exaggerating. That night, Armin decided to let it go, hoping it was a one-time mistake. But the next morning, when he stepped outside, the Tesla was gone and his solar batteries were lower than usual. His scooter had not charged fully, and the lights inside the house flickered slightly. He sighed. Maybe it was a coincidence. But the following evening, he saw the same thing. The white Tesla parked by his side outlet, quietly drinking from his solar grid. And this time, he noticed something else. The woman had timed it for when he was usually inside cooking dinner. She must have thought he wouldn't notice. Armin felt his patience slipping. He had worked so hard for this system. It was not cheap, and it was not easy to maintain. Every watt of power mattered. He did not want to be unkind, but neither did he want to be taken advantage of. He spent the rest of the night thinking. Was he being too polite? Was his kindness being mistaken for weakness? The quiet peace of his home was already being disturbed, and it was only the beginning. As he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, Armin realized something important. If this continued, he would not only lose money, he would lose the sense of freedom and joy he had worked so hard to create. And that was something he could not allow. The next morning, Armin sat on his porch with a cup of tea in his hand, staring at the neighbor's house. The Tesla sat in the driveway, its paint shining under the soft sun. He had barely slept all night, his mind restless with frustration. He had always been the kind of person who avoided conflict. He believed in patience, in talking things out, in solving problems with calm words. But now, he felt trapped. He could not let his new neighbor continue to drain his solar power. It was not fair, and it was not right. By late afternoon, when he saw the woman Karen step outside to collect her mail, he decided it was time. Armin stood up, brushed the dust from his shirt, and walked across the lawn. "Hello," he greeted politely. Karen turned, her sunglasses covering half her face, though the sun was weak. "Oh, it's you," she said casually, as if they had been friends for years. Armin nodded. "Yes. I just wanted to talk again about the outlet. I noticed your car was plugged in yesterday and the day before. I really need you to stop using my solar system." Karen tilted her head, smiling in a way that felt more like amusement than kindness. "Oh, come on. You're making too big a deal out of this. You have so much energy, more than you can use. Why waste it? Think of it as me helping you not let it go to waste." Armin took a slow breath, trying to keep calm. "It's not wasted. It charges my batteries. It powers my house. And it costs me to maintain the system. Please, I'm asking kindly, don't use it." Karen's smile slowly faded. She crossed her arms. "You know, you're being very selfish. This is a community. We share things here. I've lived under Hoa rules for years, and I know how it works. If you didn't want to share, you shouldn't have moved here." Her tone was firm, almost scolding, as if Armin was the one making a mistake. He blinked, surprised at how quickly the conversation had turned. "I understand community rules," Armin said softly. "But my outlet is not community property. It is on my house, connected to my system. I paid for all of it. Sharing is fine, but only if both people agree. And I do not agree." Karen sighed dramatically, as if he was being unreasonable. "Listen, I drive an electric car. I'm helping the planet. Shouldn't you be proud that your energy is being used for something good? Besides, it's not like you're losing anything. The sun is free." Armin felt his patience slipping. He had tried to explain calmly, but her words stung. The sun might be free, but the system was not. He thought of the years of saving, the long hours of work, the careful planning that had gone into making his dream come true. "The sun is free," Armin said, his voice steady, "but my system is not. Please respect that." Karen narrowed her eyes, her smile disappearing completely now. For the first time, her voice turned sharp. "Fine. Do what you want. But I don't think the Hoa will agree with you. Around here, rules matter, and people like you don't get to make your own." Without waiting for his reply, she turned and walked back into her house, slamming the door shut. Armin stood in silence for a long moment. He felt a heaviness in his chest. He had expected her to understand, maybe even apologize. But instead, she had accused him, made him feel like the one at fault. That evening, as the sun dipped below the trees, Armin walked around his garden, thinking. The flowers swayed gently in the breeze, the panels on his roof gleamed in the fading light, but his heart felt heavy. He wondered if he had made a mistake moving here. When night came, he checked his system. The batteries were lower again. His scooter's charge was incomplete. The camera he had installed showed the truth. Karen had plugged in her Tesla once more, this time late at night when she thought no one would notice. Armin clenched his fists as he watched the recording. It was no mistake, no confusion. She knew exactly what she was doing. She was stealing his power, ignoring his words, and hiding behind her rules to protect herself. He wanted to go over and confront her again, but he stopped himself. Words had failed once. They would fail again. Instead, he sat quietly at his desk, looking at the papers from his solar system. He remembered the pride he had felt when he first saw his house shining with clean energy. Now that pride was turning into bitterness. Something had to change. Armin realized that if he kept waiting for fairness, he would lose not just his energy but also his peace of mind. Karen would not stop on her own. And if the Hoa refused to help, he would have to find his own way. As he shut down his laptop and turned off the lights, a thought grew inside him, a thought that would not leave. He would no longer ask. He would no longer beg. If Karen wanted to test his patience, she was about to learn just how far it could go. The following week tested Armin's patience more than anything else. He had already told Karen twice not to use his solar outlet, but each night the same thing happened. When the street was quiet, and most neighbors were asleep, Karen would quietly roll out the long charging cable from her garage, walk to the side of Armin's house, and plug in her Tesla. Armin noticed the pattern. His solar batteries were always lower in the morning, his scooter often half-charged, and sometimes the lights in his house flickered at night when too much power was being pulled. He could no longer ignore it. One evening, as he sat by the window sipping tea, he saw it again, the white Tesla slowly charging, its green light blinking steadily. Karen had timed it perfectly, when she thought Armin would be inside. She moved quickly, looking around once before connecting the cable. Armin sighed. He realized this was not confusion anymore. It was deliberate. She knew it was wrong, but she did it anyway. The next morning, Armin decided to take action. He went to a small electronics shop and bought a simple outdoor security camera. It wasn't expensive, but it was enough. By the afternoon, he had installed it above the outlet, facing the exact spot where Karen always connected her car. That night, as expected, the Tesla returned. The camera recorded everything: the careful steps, the quick glance around, the cable being pushed into the socket. Armin watched the footage the next morning, and for the first time, he had proof. Still, he did not want to escalate things too quickly. He printed a picture from the video and slipped it into an envelope with a polite note: "Please stop using my outlet. This is private property. If it continues, I will have to report it." He placed it on Karen's porch. But when he checked his outlet the following night, the Tesla was back again. This time, Karen even stayed outside for a few minutes, scrolling on her phone while her car charged, as if daring him to stop her. Armin's frustration grew heavier. He decided it was time to go to the HOA. Surely, with video evidence, they would act. The next morning, he walked to the HOA office, a small building near the entrance of the neighborhood. Inside, he met the president, a man in his 60s named Mr. Thomas. He explained everything: his solar system, Karen's repeated behavior, the video proof. He placed the printed pictures on the desk, his voice calm but firm. Mr. Thomas adjusted his glasses, glanced at the pictures, and leaned back. "Well, Armin, I understand your frustration. But you must know, the HOA doesn't usually get involved in small disputes between neighbors. These things are better solved with conversation." Armin stared at him. "Sir, I did talk to her. Twice. And she ignored me. She's stealing my power every night. It is not a small dispute." The president sighed. "Look, I don't want to sound harsh, but solar energy is a bit complicated. Some people don't see it as personal property the same way they see regular electricity. It's hard for us to enforce rules in such cases." Armin's hands tightened into fists under the desk. "So you're saying she can keep doing this, and nothing will happen?" Mr. Thomas shook his head. "No, I'm saying, we prefer not to interfere. If it gets worse, maybe we can issue a general reminder to all neighbors about respecting property. But direct punishment? That's not really our way." Armin left the office with a heavy heart. He had gone there hoping for help, hoping the community leaders would stand by what was right. Instead, he walked away feeling more alone than ever. That night, he sat at his desk watching the video again. Karen's face glowed faintly under the porch light as she bent down to plug in her car. She looked so casual, so confident, as if she truly believed she had the right to do it. Armin felt a wave of anger rise in him, but also a strange calm. He realized now that no one was going to save him. Not the HOA, not the rules, not polite conversations. If he wanted this to stop, he would have to stop it himself. The days passed, and the stealing continued. Sometimes twice in one day, if Karen's Tesla battery was low. Armin pretended not to notice, but inside, he was planning. He began researching his system late at night, reading about voltage controls, safety cutoffs, and surge protections. He wasn't planning anything dangerous. He didn't want to damage her car. But he wanted a way to make her realize that stealing from him would not be so simple anymore. For now, he stayed quiet. He didn't confront her again. He didn't go back to the HOA. Instead, he kept collecting more footage, more proof, building a silent record of every single time she crossed the line. Armin knew patience was a strength, but now patience had to turn into something sharper. Because sooner or later, Karen was going to face a lesson she would never forget. The nights in Armin's home had changed. What once felt peaceful now carried a constant tension. Each evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the solar panels stopped glowing with energy, Armin found himself waiting. Waiting to see when the Tesla would appear. Waiting to hear the faint click of the outlet. Waiting to watch his hard-earned electricity drain into someone else's car. He had proof. He had video after video of Karen sneaking over, plugging in, and leaving her car overnight. But what good was proof if no one cared? The HOA had dismissed him. The community leaders had turned their heads. And Karen, emboldened by their silence, acted bolder with every passing day. One evening, Armin sat at his desk, staring at the flickering battery indicator on his system. The number was far lower than it should have been. He had calculated the usage carefully, but Karen's late-night charging sessions had drained it faster than he could replenish it. His scooter, his lights, even the backup batteries he relied on for emergencies, everything was suffering. A storm brewed inside him. He thought back to the day the solar system was installed. The joy he had felt as he stood outside, watching the panels catch sunlight, had been one of the happiest moments of his life. It was his pride, his reward for years of saving and working hard. And now that joy was being stolen, day after day, by someone who didn't respect him enough to even ask. Armin set down his tea and leaned back in his chair. "Enough," he whispered. That word echoed in the silence of the room. Enough of waiting. Enough of asking politely. Enough of watching someone else take advantage of his kindness. For the first time, his anger sharpened into focus. He didn't want revenge. He didn't want to hurt anyone. But he wanted a solution, a way to make Karen stop on her own. Words had failed. Rules had failed. It was time for action. The next morning, Armin began his research. He opened his laptop and searched everything he could about solar grids, voltage settings, and protective circuits. He read late into the night, taking notes, watching diagrams, studying how electricity flowed. The system he had installed was safe, but it had many hidden features, many ways to adjust how power was delivered. He discovered that he could program his outlet to respond differently when unusual usage was detected. He could set it to cut off power suddenly, or deliver a brief harmless surge that would confuse the device drawing energy. It wouldn't cause damage, but it would certainly shock the one stealing. The idea gave him a small sense of relief. Armin spent the next few days carefully testing his system. He plugged in his scooter, his laptop, small appliances, making sure the adjustments worked safely. Each time, the system responded exactly as planned, normal for his devices, but disruptive for any heavy or unfamiliar load. At night, as he adjusted wires and checked readings, he thought about Karen. He pictured her confident smile, her dismissive words, "The sun is free." He remembered how she had accused him of being selfish, when all he wanted was fairness. The more he remembered, the firmer his resolve became. One evening, while adjusting the settings, he paused and looked out his window. The street was calm, the houses quiet, lights glowing warmly behind curtains. Most neighbors lived their lives peacefully, respecting each other. It was only Karen who chose to cross the line. Armin realized something then. This wasn't just about electricity anymore. It was about respect. It was about boundaries. It was about the right to enjoy his own home without being taken advantage of. That night, as he finished his final adjustments, he felt lighter. He didn't know exactly when Karen would come again, but he was ready. The following day passed slowly. He spent time in the garden, trimming his plants, watering the flowers, but inside, his thoughts were on the outlet. Would tonight be the night she came again? When darkness fell, he sat by the window, pretending to read, though his eyes kept drifting toward the side of his house. Hours passed. At last, near midnight, he heard the faint scrape of footsteps on gravel, the quiet sound of a cable being dragged. His heart raced, but he stayed still, watching through the curtains. There she was, Karen, glancing left and right before plugging her Tesla into his outlet. She looked so calm, so sure of herself. Then, as the car tried to pull power, the system reacted. The Tesla beeped loudly, its light flashing red. Karen jumped back, startled. She bent down, checking the cable, trying again. The system surged harmlessly, and the car refused to charge. From his window, Armin watched in silence. His lips curved into the faintest smile. For the first time in weeks, he felt like he had taken back a piece of control. Karen, confused and frustrated, pulled the cable out, muttering to herself as she walked back to her driveway. The Tesla remained empty, its battery untouched. Armin leaned back, exhaling deeply. He hadn't harmed her, but he had made his point clear: stealing his power would no longer be easy. As he turned off his lamp and prepared for bed, a thought stayed with him. This was just the beginning. Karen might not give up so quickly. But neither would he. And now, the game had changed. The first night Armin's system reacted, Karen looked more surprised than upset. She had pulled the cable out, shaken her head, and walked back to her driveway as if nothing serious had happened. Armin knew her well enough now: one strange incident would not stop her. She was too sure of herself, too used to having her way. For a few days, nothing happened. The Tesla sat quietly in Karen's driveway, and Armin almost believed she had given up. But his heart told him otherwise. People like Karen did not stop because they understood. They stopped only when they were forced to. On the fourth night, he was proven right. Just past midnight, the sound returned: the quiet drag of the charging cable, the soft shuffle of feet on gravel. Armin, sitting by his window with the curtains drawn, watched her once again connect her car to his outlet. This time, she looked more cautious. She bent down longer, checked the cable twice, and waited. The Tesla beeped, tried to charge, then immediately stopped with a flash of red. Karen stepped back, confused. She unplugged and plugged it in again, but the same thing happened. Armin's system was working exactly as he had planned. He felt a calmness settle over him. For weeks, she had stolen from him, and he had felt powerless. But now the balance had shifted. He had created a barrier she could not cross, at least not without a fight. The next morning, Armin adjusted his setup again. The harmless surge he had programmed was enough to stop her car from charging, but he wanted to make sure she could never bypass it. He installed a small control box near the outlet, hidden under a panel, that allowed him to watch in real time how much power was being drawn. If anything unusual happened, he could increase or decrease the voltage with a single switch. It felt strange, almost like preparing for a battle. But that was exactly what it had become: a battle of patience, of control, of willpower. That evening, as the sun sank and the solar panels finished their day's work, Armin sat by his window again. He was not nervous anymore. He was ready. At exactly 11 o'clock, Karen came out. This time she didn't even bother to look around much. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who believed no one could stop her. She dragged the cable, plugged in, and crossed her arms as the Tesla blinked. Armin's hand hovered over the small control switch he had set up on his desk. He watched as the car tried to pull power. For a moment, it worked: the green light blinked steadily. Karen smiled to herself, satisfied. Then Armin flicked the switch. The system surged harmlessly, the Tesla beeped, and the charging stopped. Karen jumped, startled again. She bent down quickly, tugging at the cable, muttering words Armin couldn't hear. She tried 3 more times, and each time the same result: charging for a second, then shutting down with a sharp beep. From his window, Armin could see her frustration building. She shook her head, checked her phone, even tapped the car's screen, as if trying to override what was happening. But nothing worked. Finally, after nearly 20 minutes of trying, Karen yanked the cable free and stormed back toward her house, leaving the Tesla unchanged. Armin leaned back in his chair and let out a deep breath. His plan had worked perfectly. She hadn't realized yet that it was not a technical problem, it was his system rejecting her. The days that followed were tense but strangely satisfying. Karen came again, and again. Each night she tried, each night Armin's system stopped her. Sometimes she would spend half an hour trying, other times she gave up quickly. But every single attempt failed. Armin felt his confidence grow. For weeks he had been the quiet, patient neighbor who let things slide. But now he was the one in control. He had drawn a line, and his system had become his shield. One afternoon, as he trimmed his garden, he saw Karen watching him from her porch. Her arms were crossed, her face tight with annoyance. She didn't say anything, but her eyes told him everything. She knew something was wrong, but she couldn't prove it. That night, she came earlier than usual, perhaps thinking a different time would make a difference. Armin was ready. The moment the Tesla tried to pull power, he adjusted the control box. The car beeped sharply, the cable sparked lightly, and the system cut off instantly. Karen gasped, stepping back quickly. She stared at the car, at the cable, and then at Armin's house. For the first time, she looked uncertain. Inside, Armin sat calmly, his tea warm in his hand. He didn't need to shout, didn't need to confront her. His system spoke for him. When Karen finally unplugged and walked back to her driveway, Armin allowed himself a small smile. The lesson was being delivered slowly, but surely. He knew Karen's pride would not let her quit easily. She might complain to the Hoa. She might try to argue. She might even accuse him of sabotage. But none of that mattered now. He had proof of her actions, and he had built a defense she could not break. For the first time in weeks, Armin slept peacefully. His solar system glowed silently on the roof, his scooter was fully charged, and his home was filled with calm. The battle was not over yet. But the balance had shifted. And deep inside, Armin knew he was no longer the one being tested. Karen was. Karen's patience had finally reached its limit. Night after night, she had tried to charge her Tesla from Armin's outlet, and night after night, it had failed. Every beep, every surge, every sudden cut-off had left her frustrated and embarrassed. She had never encountered anything like it. She didn't understand why her car refused to charge. One evening, she stormed across the yard, dragging her charging cable with urgency. Armin, as usual, was watching from his window, calm and collected. He had expected this moment for weeks. He didn't need to move a muscle. The system was ready, and it would react automatically. As soon as the Tesla connected, the familiar beep rang out, louder this time. Karen jumped back, her hands flying to her face. She tugged at the cable, unplugged it, and tried again. Nothing worked. The car's screen flashed red repeatedly, signaling an error she couldn't understand. Her frustration boiled over. Finally, she stormed to Armin's front door, banging sharply. Armin opened the door slowly, calm but alert. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice steady. Karen glared at him. "What have you done to my car? Why won't it charge?" Armin took a deep breath. "Nothing. Your car isn't broken. My system just won't allow it to draw power without permission." Her eyebrows rose in disbelief. "What do you mean? Are you saying you're controlling it?" That's impossible." Armin shook his head slightly, Still calm. It's not impossible. You've been using my private solar system without asking. I adjusted the outlet to protect my property. That's all. Karen's face turned red, both from anger and embarrassment. You can't do that. I'll tell the Hoa. I'll call the police. Armin didn't flinch. He held up the small printed screenshots from his camera. Go ahead. The Hoa will see everything. Every time you plugged in, every attempt, it's all documented. Karen's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, she had no words. The proof was undeniable. She had been caught red-handed. She glared at him, muttering under her breath, and stormed back to her house. The following morning, Karen visited the Hoa office herself. She demanded action, claiming that Armin was sabotaging her car and causing problems. The Hoa president, Mr. Thomas, listened carefully, though he looked skeptical. Armin arrived shortly after, calm and prepared. He presented the camera footage, the printed records, and even the notes of Karen's repeated attempts to use his outlet. She has been plugging into my personal solar system for weeks without permission, he explained. I've asked her multiple times to stop, and she ignored me. The system I set up only protects my property, it does nothing to her car permanently. The president and board members watched the footage. Karen stood silently, now embarrassed as every attempt she had made was shown clearly. Her confidence had vanished. Mr. Thomas cleared his throat. Well, this changes things. The board cannot ignore clear evidence of repeated unauthorized access to another resident's property. Karen, you have been warned officially. Any further attempts to use Mr. Armin's solar outlet will result in fines or further action. Karen's face burned with frustration. She opened her mouth, but no argument came. The board had made their decision, and the evidence was clear. She could no longer deny it. That evening, Karen returned home, quiet and withdrawn. She didn't attempt to connect her Tesla to Armin's outlet again. The once confident, defiant neighbor had learned a hard lesson in respect and boundaries. Armin, meanwhile, felt a wave of relief. The tension that had filled his evenings for weeks began to fade. He could finally enjoy his home, his solar system, and the peace he had worked so hard to create. He stood on his porch, looking at the panels glinting in the setting sun. It felt good to have control over his own property again. But more than that, he felt proud not because he had defeated Karen, but because he had handled the situation with patience, intelligence, and care. He hadn't harmed her or her car, he had simply protected what was rightfully his. Over the next few days, the neighborhood noticed the change. Karen avoided eye contact and kept her distance. Armin went about his life, smiling at the other neighbors, tending his garden, charging his scooter, and enjoying the simple pleasure of watching his solar panels work perfectly. He had learned something important from the experience. Respect, once broken, cannot be restored by words alone. Sometimes, it must be enforced. And boundaries, once ignored, must be defended firmly but always fairly. That night, as Armin turned off his lights and walked through his quiet house, he felt a sense of calm he hadn't felt in weeks. The storm had passed. The balance had returned. And for the first time since Karen moved in, his home truly felt like a sanctuary again. He smiled softly to himself. The lesson had been clear. The solar panels, quietly gleaming under the moonlight, were not just a source of power, they were a reminder that peace and fairness could be preserved, even when challenged. The week after the Hoa's warning felt strangely calm. Karen did not approach Armin's outlet, and she drove past his house only when necessary, her pride visibly bruised. For Armin, the tension that had clouded his evenings for weeks slowly lifted. He could finally enjoy his home again, not just as a place to live, but as a sanctuary, a space where his hard work and careful planning were respected. Each morning, he walked around his garden, watering the plants and watching the sunlight glint off the solar panels. He had never appreciated their quiet beauty so much. They had become more than just a source of energy, they were a symbol of independence and persistence, a reminder of what he had built for himself. Armin smiled to himself as he charged his scooter without interruption, flipped switches to turn on lights that stayed bright, and opened his windows to the soft hum of his solar-powered home. Every small action was a victory, a return to normalcy that felt sweeter than he expected. The other neighbors noticed the change too. Mrs. Malik from across the street waved more warmly, commenting on how quiet the evenings had become. Mr. Johnson, the retired teacher down the lane, complimented Armin on how well maintained his garden looked. Even small children on their bikes waved as they passed. For the first time since Karen had moved in, Armin felt the neighborhood felt genuinely welcoming again. He thought about Karen sometimes. Not with anger, not with resentment, but with a quiet understanding that some people only learn lessons the hard way. Her repeated attempts to take what was not hers had been a challenge, and through it, he had discovered something about himself. He realized he had patience he didn't know he possessed, intelligence to find a clever solution, and strength to stand firm without letting anger control him. The experience had tested him, but it had also sharpened him. One evening, Armin sat on his porch, sipping tea as the sun set behind the trees. The solar panels reflected the golden light, bathing his garden in warmth. He thought back to the first week of trouble, to the frustration of waking up with drained batteries and half-charged devices. He remembered the nights of anxiety, watching the camera footage, and the hopeless feeling of the host's dismissal. And he smiled. Because he had endured, he had learned, and he had taken back control without losing his calm. Karen had been persistent, yes, but Armin's quiet determination had proven stronger. He had set boundaries, defended his property, and shown that respect was not something to be ignored. That night, the neighborhood was unusually still. Armin walked inside, checked the battery levels, and watched the dashboard of his solar system. Full. Everything balanced. He flipped switches, tested the lights, and even charged his scooter twice for good measure. It all worked perfectly. As he leaned back in his chair, he reflected on what he had learned. Life, he realized, often required more than just following rules or being polite. Sometimes, it required strategy, patience, and courage. It required knowing when to stand firm and when to act. And above all, it required a belief in fairness not as a concept, but as something to protect. The following days passed peacefully. Karen avoided any further attempts at taking power. Armin continued his daily routine, enjoying small victories: the hum of the system, the warmth of the sun, the soft rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. He even added a few new plants to his garden, decorating the space with colors that reflected his mood: calm, steady, and victorious. One evening, he noticed a young family moving into a nearby house. He waved, introducing himself and offering friendly advice about the neighborhood. The children ran across the yard laughing, their energy infectious. Armin realized that while the conflict with Karen had been stressful, it had also reminded him of the value of community, the importance of mutual respect, of helping each other without taking advantage. As the moon rose, casting silver light on his quiet street, Armin stepped outside and looked at the roof. The solar panels shimmered under the night sky, a silent testament to his efforts. For a moment, he felt a deep satisfaction, a peace that went beyond winning or losing. It was the peace of living with integrity, of protecting what was right, and of handling challenges with calm intelligence. Armin whispered softly to himself, "Respect isn't given. It's earned. And boundaries, they're meant to be protected." He turned and walked inside, closing the door gently behind him. His home was safe, his system fully functional, and his heart finally free from the weight of weeks of frustration. Outside, the street was calm, and even Karen's house seemed quieter. The once tense nights had been replaced by gentle stillness. And for Armin, that quiet victory without anger, without confrontation, only through patience, cleverness, and calm determination felt sweeter than any other success he had ever experienced. He smiled, knowing that the lessons of the past weeks would stay with him forever. For Armin, life had returned to balance. Peace had been reclaimed. And the neighborhood, finally, felt like home.